because people have bought this idiot meta-Marxism, which is that the way to look at every social relationship that people ever have is through the lens of power.
I think that this clip is incredible because Jordan Peterson basically breaks down exactly why, the college protesters and everybody in college is taking that side as opposed to Israel, because they have sort of messed up this oppressed narrative. So they believe that the Palestinians are the victims, and therefore, again, if the Palestinians are actually the victims and they commit October 7th, it's a terrible thing, but they're saying, okay, they're just breaking out of jail. And watch him break this down on Bill Maher, and I think that this is a perfect diagnosis.
But what happens is that they are then saying that being oppressed is being good. I don't know if the Holocaust.
Yeah, well, this is the main issue. I mean, part of the reason that you see all this foolishness on university campuses too is because people have bought this idiot meta-Marxism, which is that the way to look at every social relationship that people ever have is through the lens of power. And that is, we can put that squarely at the feet of the universities, as far as I'm concerned, is, marriage is a patriarchal institution, and business is nothing but oppression, and you have to view every single situation that emerged historically as oppressor versus oppressed. And then once you get that, which you can get in about 2 minutes if you sit in a course that teaches that sort of thing, you have a lens to moralize about the whole world through. And then you see the situation is that the leftists have already decided the Palestinians are the victims. And as you pointed out, if you're a victim, then you're morally righteous. And even more conveniently, if you stand for the victim, then you're morally righteous, regardless of what you do with your own life. And that's pretty much what university students are taught from the time they enter the university classroom. And that's how they, orient themselves morally. Well, and that's at the hands of the radical left, too, Bill. And one of the things the Democrats also have to pay the price for, I would say, is their absolute refusal to draw a line between the moderate Democrats and the extremists. They're completely incapable of doing that. Like, I've talked to 40 senators and congressmen in the last 5 years. I asked them all the same question, including RFK. He wouldn't answer either. When does the left go too far? Well, we certainly bloody well saw it in the last month, didn't we? Because they got the oppressive narrative a little mucked up, we might say. And the consequences of that are going to unfold pretty brutally over the next few months.
That was our edit. He's talking about, this is right after October 7th. So this isn't like now where, okay, you could potentially make the case that there's a lot of dead children. Okay, whatever. Maybe, I actually care about the children and therefore I'm protesting. What he's saying is October 8th, you had Palestine protests, people saying, oh, Israel needs to be destroyed. Literally the day after, 1,200 Jews were murdered in Israel. And so what he's trying to say is the reason why these people are so broken is because they look at Palestinians as these people that are so oppressed, and almost like, I don't know, if you've seen like movies, for example, Hollywood. You go to Hollywood, you'll see like whenever the underdog comes back and destroys his oppressor, in any context, it's always looked upon as a great thing, not necessarily as a good, to be honest, like in actual life. But what happens is people have this idea in the West that anytime that somebody is oppressed, anytime that somebody is a victim, anything that they do becomes morally justifiable. And it really isn't. It really, even if this is the number one argument. Also, like Konstantin Kisin talks about, even if you're going to say Israel was terrible to Gaza before October 7th. It was a total open-air prison, all this other stuff. Even if that, Israel still has to respond. Israel still has to, like, it was the worst attack of Jews since the Holocaust. You still have that argument of, like, what do you expect Israel to do?
Right.
That's just what I would say. Like, you can't make the argument that Israel should do nothing because no sovereign state would do that. So, irregardless of anything Israel does, October 7th happens, and it is a reset. It is history starts on October 7th because, again, the Middle East is a region where you can't just do nothing. If you do nothing, it'll happen again, or other states will look at you incredibly weak. Yeah. So if Israel wants to maintain the relationships with other Arab countries and Saudi Arabia and all these other big players, it has to show that it has a counterweight to Iran. And in order to show that, they need to respond in a big way. And that's really what they did and what they're doing. And I think that Israel really screwed up the response because they should have been way smarter about it. So, for example, this is my biggest problem with Israel. Right after October 7th, they should have done a siege, which they did. For the first 24 hours, Israel had a siege. And then because the international community, cried genocide and starvation, all this other stuff, they said, okay, not doing a siege. Now we're going to go in and send a bunch of Israeli soldiers to go and potentially try to root out Hamas. But it was a stupid idea. All they had to do was 3 weeks siege. There are literally Hamas records of them saying, like, there are records that came out later. We're almost done. Like, we have no food. There's nothing left. And then Israel started putting in tons of humanitarian aid, all this other stuff, and that's what happened. And that's what Ben Gvir says. He says the only thing that for Israel to do right now is to bomb literally bomb the aid that Israel sent in. Yeah, we should go and bomb the actual aid that we sent to Gaza, because otherwise Hamas has a lifeline.
But also what I think they could have done is like actually tracked where they put like trackers or something on every truck where it's going and who's taking it, and maybe get a lot of intel that way. I'm not sure if they did that, but that could have helped a lot, finding out where these things are going and where their warehouses are and going in directly to their stronghold, I guess.
I think part of the problem is they're so embedded in the civilian population, Hamas is, that you're talking about first of all, the ideology is pretty much the same. They all want the Jews gone. A. B, a lot of them coordinate with Hamas. So that's already a problem. And then they're all over. So they're underground. They're there. They're here. You don't really know who's a terrorist, who's not. Even if you do, if you kill somebody that is a terrorist, but it's not verified, whatever, it's just totally mucked up the whole situation.
Right. Yeah, I remember the first year of the war started. It's just like finding RPGs under cribs and like all these crazy things, all the pictures coming out of there. It's like exactly. if there's a zombie apocalypse, that's where you'd want to be, like weapons everywhere.
Yeah, but anyway, to go back, I think a lot of people notice this, but he said it first. Jordan Peterson, with this idea of like there's an oppressor-oppressed narrative in the West, that whenever the oppressed tries to do anything, or the perceived oppressed, meaning obviously the Palestinians, I believe, aren't really the oppressed people here. They are oppressed, but not for the reasons that that is Israel's fault or anything like that. I think that they're oppressed because of their own stupidity, as well as the fact that Hamas is now in power. So they voted in Hamas. Hamas committed October 7th, and they got what they paid for. You play stupid games, win stupid prizes. You effed around, you found out. All those types of slogans that are so true. After October 7th, they were cheering, and I don't care what people say, like, oh, it was just like a few videos. Like, no, there were thousands of Gazans, and if you're going to say thousands of Gazans at random cheering for October 7th, that's what it is. If Hamas was successful, put it this way, I tell everyone, like all these protests, these anti-Hamas protests in Gaza right now, if Hamas was successful, those wouldn't be happening. So if Hamas was destroying Israel, they would be like cheering on Hamas like you can't believe. It's because Hamas is like getting destroyed and actually sucks at what they're doing. They're freaking out about it. Right. Like they're just like, we can't handle this, because they don't want to be on the losing side. So if Hamas was doing well, they support Hamas. When Hamas does badly, they blame Hamas for the fact that they're in a shitty situation. Right. That's what I would say.
It's really the same ideology of like the Houthis, for example, because they've been in a civil war for like 10 years. And just the very fact that they send out a rocket once in a while, they're like, we're winning. See, like, we're still here. We're relevant. So I think it's the same idea with Hamas. Yeah, they've been destroyed half their living space there. But just the fact that they get to send out a rocket or an RPG once in a while is like, it's their signaling to the world that they're still relevant somehow.